Good evening. My name is Tamar Williams and I'm a storyteller. And I've got a story to tell you this evening. It's my favourite story, and it's a story that my dad used to tell me when I was a little girl. And the story begins with a little princess. Now, this little princess was very, very sick. She was very ill indeed, and she'd been ill for a very long time. And her father, the king, had tried everything he could to make her better. He'd sent out into the land for all the best doctors to come to the castle and try to cure the little princess. But as time went past, the doctors all left the castle and went back to where they'd come from. And the little princess just got sicker and sicker and sicker, until finally all she could do was lie in her bed, and her face was as pale as the pillows that she lay upon. And finally, the king knew that time was coming to an end and that he had no way of making his little girl better, so he did the only thing he could think to do. He gathered the three most important people in his land into one room. And these three important people, and you're going to have to help me to remember these three people. The first was the Prime Minister. The second was the General of the Army. And the third was the court physician, the court doctor. The king gathered these three most important people into one room, and he said to them, "My little girl, the princess, is very sick, and I'm very afraid. Please, does any of you have any idea how we could make her better?" Well, the Prime Minister stood up, and the Prime Minister had a very thick grey moustache that quivered when he spoke, and he said, "My lord, you know, everybody knows the little princess is very sick, and everyone knows she's probably going to die. But if you want any chance of making her better, you're going to have to start making her run up and down mountains 10 miles a day, get the blood flowing through her veins. That'll do it for her." Well, the General of the Army, he stood up next, and he had a very red face that got redder when he was angry, and he said, "My lord, that's ridiculous. That's preposterous. The Prime Minister has no idea what he is talking about. In fact, I think he should get the sack. Everybody knows that the little princess is very sick. Everyone knows she's probably going to die. But if you want any chance of making her better, you're going to have to start giving her lots of raw, red meat. Get the iron back into her veins." Well, that is when the court physician stood up, the court doctor, and he had a pair of wire-rimmed glasses that slipped to the end of his nose when he was angry, and his glasses were now dangling on the very end of his nose. He said, "My lord, that's ridiculous. That's preposterous." You can say that with me if you want to. Let's practice. "That's ridiculous. That's preposterous. Everybody knows the little princess is very sick. Everyone knows she's probably going to die. But these two don't know what they're talking about. In fact, I think they should probably both get the sack. If you want any chance of making the little princess better, you're going to have to start giving her lots of smoothies with vegetables and carrots and things in them. Get the vitamin C back into her body." And then, of course, the three most important men in the land began to argue with each other. They waved their arms around, they raised their voices, they shouted, "That's ridiculous, that's preposterous," on and on and on. And the king sat and put his head in his hands and did not know what to do. But luckily there was another person in the room at this time, and that person was the court jester. Now, you might know what a court jester's job is, but I'm going to tell everybody, just in case there's someone who doesn't know. The court jester's job was to make the king laugh. And he had a long hat with a bell on the end that rang as he walked. But he had a hard job because, you see, this king never laughed because his daughter was so very sick. And the court jester had been listening to this conversation. And the court jester got to his feet and said, "My lord, I wonder, has anybody here thought to ask the little princess what might make her better?" Well, of course, the three most important men in the land waved their arms and shouted, "That's ridiculous! That's preposterous! The little princess is a child. Children are famously very stupid. They know nothing. We're not going to ask her." But the court jester said, "My lord, I really think you should ask the little princess. After all, she is the one who is sick." And so the king left the room that had the three most important people in it, and he went to his little girl's bedroom, and she was lying in bed, propped up on her pillows, and the king sat beside the little princess and took her very small hand in his very big hand, and he held it tight, and he said, "My love, you've been sick for a really long time." And she said, "Yes, I have. Sometimes I feel like I'm getting better, but mostly I feel like I'm getting worse." And the king took a deep sigh and he said, "My love, is there anything in the whole wide world that might make you better?" And the little princess said, "Well, yes, there is, in fact. I think that I would be better if I could have the moon." And the king's heart sank into his big kingly boots, because how in the world was he going to get the moon for his little daughter? But he squeezed her hand and he went back into the room with the three most important people in it. And he said, "Right, we've got some work to do. The little princess says that she would feel better if she could have the moon. So how can we get the moon for the little princess?" Well, the Prime Minister stood up and his moustache was trembling with fury. He said, "My lord, that's ridiculous. That's preposterous. Everybody knows it is impossible to get the moon because the moon is 10,000 miles away and it's made of cheese." Well, the general of the army stood up. His face was bright red and flaming. "That's ridiculous. That's preposterous. My lord, the Prime Minister has no idea what he's talking about. Everybody knows that the moon is 20,000 miles away and it's made of paper. It's an origami moon." The court doctor, the court physician, he stood up. The glasses were now dangling off the end of his nose, trembling violently. "My lord, that is ridiculous. That's preposterous. Neither of these two know what they're talking about. Everybody knows that the moon is 100,000 miles away, and when you get there, it's just a little old man sitting on a bench, holding a lamp." Well, this conversation went on and on and on. They waved their arms, they shouted, "That's ridiculous, that's preposterous." And the king put his head into his hands again as he felt quite hopeless. How was he going to get the moon for his little daughter? But there was one other person in the room, the court jester, who was still there, with the bell ringing on the end of his long hat. And he came and stood beside the king and he said, "My lord, I wonder, has anybody thought to ask the little princess what she thinks the moon is made of?" And of course, the three most important people in the land shouted and waved their arms and said things like, "Why would you ask the little princess? She's a child. Children are stupid. They know nothing." But the court jester said to the king, "I really think you should ask the little princess. I think she might know." So the king did just that. He went back to his little girl's room. He sat beside her bed. He took her little hand in his big hand and he said, "All right, if, hypothetically, we could get you the moon, what do you think that the moon is made out of?" And the little princess, she thought for a little while, but she didn't have to think for long. She said, "Well, I think that the moon is made from silver. Because I suppose if you look out of your window at night and the moon is shining in the sky, it looks like it could be made from perfect gleaming silver." "Yes," said the king, "yes, you're right. The moon must be made of silver and, well, how big do you think the moon is?" And the little princess laughed and she said, "Well, that's really easy, because when I'm lying in my bed at night, I can look out of my window and the moon comes and it gets caught in the branches of the tree outside my window. And I can hold up my thumb and I can cover the moon with my thumb." Some of you might have done this when you're out on a walk in the dark and the moon is up above you. If you hold up your thumb, you can see if you can cover the face of the moon with it. And the little princess, she said, "So I think that the moon is made of silver, and I think it's probably about the same size as my thumbnail." Well, the king took this information, his heart beating fast. He left the room and he went to the court silversmith. And the court silversmith made a perfect tiny moon, exactly the same size as the little princess's thumbnail. And he also made a silver chain, and he hung that little silver moon on the silver chain, and the king took it back to the little princess's bedroom and he put it around her neck. And as soon as she was wearing that silver moon around her neck, something incredible happened to the little princess. The colour came back into her cheeks. She sat up in bed and she said, "I'm quite hungry. Can I have a bowl of porridge?" It was amazing. She was better. The king could hardly contain his excitement. He went back to the room with the three most important people in it and he said, "It worked. The little princess is better. The little silver moon around her neck somehow magically, incredibly has made her better." Now, the three most important people were not having any of this. They stood there, faces flaming, moustaches quivering, glasses trembling, and they said, "My lord, that's ridiculous. That's preposterous. What's going to happen tonight when the little princess looks out of her bedroom window and sees the moon in the sky again? She's going to know that that moon she's wearing around her neck is not the real moon, but a pretend moon. She's going to get sick again, and this time she's going to die." Well, the king hadn't thought of that, and his heart dropped again, but he looked to the corner of the room and there was the court jester. And the court jester was smiling, and the king knew what he needed to do. So he went straight back to his little girl. He went into her bedroom, but the little princess was not in bed. She was out of bed. She was running circles around the bed. And the king said, "Come and sit down, just for a moment. I know you're excited. Come and sit down just for a second." And the little princess came to sit next to her father, and he took her hand in his, and he said, "I just want to know one more thing. If you were to look out of your window tonight and you were to see the moon in the sky, what would you think?" And the little princess thought for a moment, and she said, "Oh, that's easy, because when I lose one of my teeth, a new tooth comes in its place. And I suppose that's probably the same with the moon, because after all, it wouldn't do to not have the moon in the sky. So if I look out of my window tonight and I see the moon in the sky, I'll know that that is just the adult moon that's come and grown in place of the baby moon that I've got around my neck. And from then onwards, the little princess got better and better and better. And the king made a decision that day. He sacked all the 3 most important people in his land, the Prime Minister, the General of the Army, and the court physician. And he put the court jester in charge of everything. And from then onwards, the decisions made in that land were wise and safe and happy ones. And I hope that you have enjoyed that story about the little princess and the moon. It is my favourite story. I hope wherever you are, you're finding ways of staying healthy and staying safe, whether that is your own little moon or the other ways that you're keeping yourself safe and happy. I hope you enjoyed this festival day. Good night, sleep well, and sweet dreams to all of you.